Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2597 of The Tom Woods Show. And we have Jack Hunter with us, who I guess I've known Jack for quite a long time through many different things that he did and places that he used to write. I mean, I used to write fairly regularly, I guess for the American Conservative, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You had that video series that we all liked?
I did, going back to like 2009.
Yeah. And then with Rand Paul, you worked on, or are you a co-author or is it a with or whatever?
I was a co-author with Senator Paul for the Tea Party Goes to Washington, which came out in 2011, the moment he became a senator. They sort of coincided. It worked for him in his office and, of course, worked for Ron Paul's 2012 presidential campaign. So that's my Paul resume, I guess.
Yes. Well, we also add something called the Rand Paul Review.
Yes.
Where you can also be found.
I'm a contributor there. It's on Substack. Just look for Rand Paul Review. I write there frequently, and Rand Paul is gracious enough to retweet the things I write sometimes. That's always nice.
Oh, that is nice. Well, obviously, we've just had the Trump inauguration for the second time. So let's go. Let's go back in time and work our way up bit by bit. So I guess I probably knew you. Did I know you before the Ron Paul presidential campaigns?
I did. It was through like paleo-conservative circles, and we read Chronicles. We were like one of 6 people that read Chronicles at the time, or especially younger people at the time. We're not younger now, but we were at one time.
We were.
But yeah, it was sort of those, I didn't become earnestly libertarian until Ron Paul's 2008 campaign. And, I was more of a Pat Buchanan guy. I still am, but I'm definitely a libertarian now. That's thanks to Ron Paul. But we definitely knew each other through sort of those, political circles and journalistic circles, mutual friends and fans of writers we liked and whatnot.
And, I remember back, though, in the Ron Paul days, I had gotten on this kick that I didn't stick with as much as I should have. But I was very interested because I had interviewed its founder, Mark Sisson, in something called the Primal Blueprint, which is very similar to paleo and keto to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
So I told you about it, Jack.
Yes.
And, when I tell people things, I just expect them to ignore what I say. But you actually went ahead and implemented it, and you took off a lot of weight. And I'm just curious to know, did you stick with that?
So I don't eat as much bread as I used to, going back to when you and I had that conversation. I was like this from the beginning. I found when you're super hardcore about it, sometimes you quit doing it. I've pretty much done it. Like, yeah, do I have sugar? Sure. But people laugh at me when I eat sandwiches and burgers. My girlfriend laughs at me. My grandmother laughs at me. I tear off all the bread where it's just enough to hold it together. I don't eat a lot of bread because of you. And it's called, I guess, the primal thing. And then it was, what was it before that? I don't know. Keto was a version of it. But yeah, I don't eat a lot of bread is the best way to answer your question as far as that it relates to that lifestyle and that dietary choice.
Okay. All right. Well, I was really happy with, I thought, how about that? He actually used it and it had some good results for him. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you and I have some great memories from the Ron Paul days. And there's definitely a role in this story of how we get to 2025 for Ron Paul. He definitely has a role in that because he was saying things that people weren't ready for then, but that they're somewhat more ready for now. I do think Dave Smith is right that we can't just very easily reproduce the Ron Paul revolution because that was a phenomenon that was peculiar to that particular moment in time. And that was a time when the immigration issue was not nearly as hot as it has since become. And I think it would have been a lot harder to hold that coalition together at that time. But still, it was a really extraordinary thing. And there was that one particular moment that you and I were at CPAC 2010 or 11.
Yeah.
And we were speaking in front of this packed audience. And we were on stage with Ron and Rand Paul and just having a discussion that the audience was sitting in on. And these were just some of the most thrilling days. Honestly, just hanging out with you at all these events, and realizing that even though we didn't win, something was happening. I couldn't put my finger on what, but some kind of a door had been opened. A corner had been turned, I felt.
Absolutely. And you say we didn't win. I would correct you there. And you may disagree. I think we did win. It just depends on what your definition of victory or winning is. To this day, the day we're sitting here having this conversation, this is Inauguration Day. Donald Trump, yesterday there was a ceasefire that happened between Israel and Palestine that happened at the behest of Steve Witkoff, who's Donald Trump's envoy. That is not the kind of thing that would have happened for a Republican president when Ron Paul ran for president in 2008. We're at a very different place in the Republican Party and American politics right now. And Ron Paul is a big part of that in a big way and deserves his just due. When I say we won something, I've told the kids at Young Americans for Liberty this for years. And a lot of it sounds old hat now because the 2008-2012 elections were so long ago. But I'm speaking at a thing that's called Young Americans for Liberty, formerly Students for Ron Paul. That was the original name. So one of the largest center-right youth groups in the country comes out of Ron Paul. Is there a Young Americans for Mitt Romney group out there? Is there Young Americans for Fred Thompson or Rudy Giuliani? No, but there is this libertarian force on the right, and specifically in Republican politics, that wasn't there in the way it just wasn't. Ron Paul was there, but most people didn't know him. He wasn't a household name. But his two presidential elections not only inspired so many people, but I think it kind of set the stage for what we're seeing now with Donald Trump. Now, is Donald Trump a libertarian? No. Are some things that libertarians like more likely to happen under him than Joe Biden or some conventional Republican or Democrat? Yeah. And you even heard Dr. Paul say some of that. So I think we've been a part of that story. I think him and his legacy is a part of that story. And I think things like a ceasefire or if the diplomatic negotiations happened between Ukraine and Russia and just that America first message. Well, Ron Paul was saying that in the Republican Party first. And I think, Tom, you said, that was a specific place and time. And I agree. And Dave Smith says you can't recreate it. And he's right. But in 2007, when Ron Paul was talking about blowback and saying all this anti-interventionist, non-interventionist stuff, Republican voters had never heard that. We were still deep in Bush Cheney thinking. Look at where we are now compared to then. And what Ron Paul and his senator son, Rand Paul, and people like Thomas Massie, and I would argue Mike Lee, Justin Amash, when he was still there, all these sort of Ron Paul-ish Republicans have all been a big part of where the Republican Party is now. And to the degree that we can do things that are optimistic and good, it goes back to the movement you and I were both a part of and so many others.
It's funny you say that thing about there's no Young Americans for, Mitt Romney. Like the Mitt Romney didn't inspire anything like that.
No,
and that really is so true. I remember those days so vividly of the dedication of our side, and whereas nobody shows up for a Mitt Romney rally. Why would you? Well, what on earth would be the point? And what are you going to learn there? Or what is it going to? You're going to say, in fact, remember, I think my old joke used to be, my life was changed permanently when I encountered the philosophy of Mitt Romney. As soon as you say the words, you have to smile.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, no, figures like him at the time, they wanted to continue the Bush Cheney version of the Republican Party. That's what McCain was supposed to do, and he got beat. That's what they wanted every election cycle. And we've got this populist revolt in the Republican Party now. When Trump went in 2016, there was still a lot of establishment Republicans that were just there to throw a monkey wrench in what he was doing and undermine him. Some of those people are still there, but they don't have the power they thought they had or did have then, that they don't have it now, what they thought they had then. I think it's a different day. He's a disruptor in the most major way. Ron Paul was a disruptor. I would argue Rand Paul is a disruptor still. That's the kind of people who, challenge the establishment the way it needs to be challenged. The neoconservatives, who are like our mortal enemy when Ron Paul ran, they've all run off to the Democratic Party. They left because they don't see much for them in the Republican Party now, and they're right.
So I guess what Trump managed to do, and I was saying to you before we recorded that there are times when I am cursing, this guy, what is he's making me crazy. I can't, what the heck, what is he thinking? But then there are other times when I find him genuinely endearing, and I think, well, I mean, on the other hand, at least there are a handful of people I very much admire around him, whereas none of those people would have come anywhere close, not just Kamala Harris, but they wouldn't have come close to Mitt Romney. There wouldn't have even been any prayer whatsoever that Mitt Romney would, for example, free Ross, or that Mitt Romney would turn against Anthony Fauci. Now, we all know Trump was much too deferential to Fauci. I mean, I believe me, I chronicled this in great detail. But the fact that he has a Jay Bhattacharya as his nominee for the NIH now, and that he brought in a Scott Atlas. There wouldn't have been a Scott Atlas under a Mitt Romney. It would have been the establishment people, because he was an establishment guy. And so what Trump accomplished was basically reaching those people in the GOP base and also outside the GOP base who felt voiceless and said, look, these people are not working for your best interest. Whatever it is they're up to, it ain't that. Now, I would argue that some of the things Trump wants to do seem on the surface to be in the best interest of these people, but are actually not going to help them. But some of them are. I mean, certainly anything you can do to unleash energy is certainly going to help people. So there are examples of that. But anyway, my point in all this is that he was able to, I think, open their eyes to, wait a minute, these problems aren't going to be solved with another Paul Ryan or another John McCain or another George W. Bush in the form of a Jeb Bush. They're not going to solve anything. We need somebody who is coming in there like a bull in a china shop. I mean, that's basically what we need. And I think from that point on, it suddenly the Overton window began to shift, because not only are you going to have a new kind of candidate, but that new kind of candidate might say things that no one has said before, or no one's been allowed to say, or at a GOP presidential debate saying that they lied us into war in Iraq and stuff like that. That's opened a lot of doors. Now suddenly things that Ron Paul was a kook for saying are just kind of old hat.
Yeah, I think that's right. He has unconventional people around him. So like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would never been the head of Health and Human Services, and it looks like he's going to be confirmed. And an issue that nobody was really thinking about, which was what they put into our foods and our general health, and what the FDA might get wrong and things like that. That's now a national issue because RFK Jr. is going to be in charge of something that oversees that. That wouldn't have happened. They don't want Tulsi Gabbard to be the director of national intelligence. She scares the hell out of them. They don't want that. They don't want Elon Musk to be in charge of a brand new agency, the task of which is to dismantle and get rid of waste in government and things that we don't need. It's funny, the last couple, I always say there's Trump himself and what he says and does, and then there's sort of all these ancillary different groups of people who latch on to Trump. The last couple of years, we've seen these national conservatism conferences where some of the people wanted like a right-wing New Deal and the state's not so bad, says Sohrab Ahmari, all this kind of stuff. Well, here we are, it's 2025, and we've got a brand new agency headed by Elon Musk that wants to, get rid of agencies and cut government. That's not really national conservatism. That's a little bit closer to libertarianism. I know we got the news today that Vivek Ramaswamy, another unconventional figure, will not be involved with Doge. It looks like he's going to run for governor of Ohio, but he's a pretty libertarian-leaning guy. And when I say that, some libertarians hear, oh, well, they're wrong on this, wrong on that. I'm not looking for purity. I'm looking for results. And if some things that libertarians would like to see happen in domestic policy and foreign policy, I'm not going to be mad at it, and I'm going to encourage it. There's an entire base in this country that just won a majority, the electoral vote and popular vote, that like what Donald Trump has to say, and a lot of what he has to say, a good chunk of what he has to say, are things that we would like him to continue saying and doing.
Hey, everybody, if you're like me, you look at your health insurance policy, which keeps getting more expensive, and you sometimes wonder, what am I even paying for here? American health insurance is an absolute mess, and no legislation that has even a prayer of getting passed is going to improve things either. Well, finally, there's something you can do about it, apart from just complaining. Because this whole mess is why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. For $175 for an individual, or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more. And you don't have to worry about doctors' networks getting in the way. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use code WOODS. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, and remember, code WOODS. Yeah, that's right. And I think, with numerous exceptions, the people around him are sounder than he is. Obviously we're not, the whole foreign policy establishment, other than Tulsi, for the most part, I'm not interested in. But, the health people, I think, are very interesting.
Sure.
I think Elon has the correct opinion on 75% of things, which is
sure.
way, way more than I ever saw. When you and I were suffering all those years ago, we didn't have anybody like that anywhere near anybody's ear. So that's at least something. I know people who know people in this situation. I feel like there's at least some remote chance that sensible things, could potentially be done. And, I've learned at this point in my life that obviously I can't expect a lot from politics. So what I want is, a few basic things. And I would love a million other things. I would love every single department shattered and, shuttered and abolished. But I'm not going to get that. There's very, very few people who want that. Even the right wing, quote unquote, doesn't want that. So I know I'm not going to get it. Doesn't mean I don't keep arguing for it, but it does mean that I don't make enemies out of people who are at least going to get me maybe a few things. That's the way. Maybe I'll get a few things, and maybe I won't. Yes, I understand politics stinks, but I'm not going to be better than morally superior to everybody. So I'm not going to participate because I have principles and these people don't. Almost nobody has any principles beyond I want my family to be comfortable, and I'll do whatever it takes to bring that about. Almost nobody cares about your principles. So for me, it's a matter of, if there is a possibility that I could have an administration where there's somebody who is not a CIA propagandist in charge of national intelligence, I'll take that. That's a win.
Absolutely. And it is about the team around him. Full disclosure, I voted for Donald Trump for the first time this year. I didn't vote for him the other 2 times. I voted third party. I voted for the libertarian candidate. And the reason why is what we're talking about. I voted for Tulsi. I voted for RFK Jr. I voted for Vivek. J.D. Vance is not a libertarian and pretty anti-capitalist in some ways, but he's not stupid either. And as a veteran, he's very smart about foreign policy things. That's not the kind of person who's typically vice president. So yeah, if we get some things, I think that's good. Look, we're in a whole new world in the 2024 election. The Libertarian Party, who have voted for their presidential candidates in the past, and it is what it is, and good for them, and A for effort. But I think Angela McArdle's decision, this hot coalition idea, and inviting Donald Trump to the LP convention and RFK Jr. and trying to get him to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, which we're sitting here with bated breath waiting on as we have this conversation. If that thing alone, Tom, and you've said this and others have said this, if Ross Ulbricht's sentence is commuted and that poor guy is set free after all those years of jail, cruel and unusual punishment, that will be the greatest accomplishment in the Libertarian Party's history. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to handle the Libertarian Party situation, because I dearly love Angela McArdle. She's a wonderful human being. She's a great person who is vastly better than every last one of her critics in every way.
Yeah.
And she's an extremely hard worker. And she does all this for no money. You don't make money. It's an unpaid position.
Right.
It's crazy. On paper, it makes no sense that anybody would take that job, right? But I think her strategy at this point is the only plausible or realistic one. I mean, I think we have learned over the past 50 years that there is just no interest among the general public in voting for a libertarian for president. There isn't, and I wish there were. And I've tried my best to persuade people, but there really just isn't. And so she thinks, well, then what's the best thing for us to do? Well, maybe see if we have some kind of negotiating stance here. And it is a fact. I do think that there are numerous positions that have been filled in the administration that are lower level, but that like at the SEC or with Bitcoin and stuff like that, or in health, that are obviously temperamentally very, very similar to us or philosophically very similar to us. And so there has definitely been, I think, a net benefit to that. I mean, it's either that or I don't think the Chase Oliver campaign is not even worth talking about, but Dave Smith was right. I don't think Chase even elevated his own position in this, like his own level of recognition in the country. I think it's about the same as when he started, whereas almost everybody else, even though it is an absolutely hopeless and hideous task running for president on the Libertarian Party ticket, they come out the other side a little bit, better known. I don't think that happened here. So we could sit there and say, look at my principles, and we get 0.2% of the vote, or maybe we just push the country 8% closer to where we are, and that's pretty good. Maybe it's 18%. I think that's a lot better. And it's not to mention that I don't even want to relitigate the Chase thing because it's not even worth talking about. I mean, he wasn't an interesting candidate. He was terrible on some things. He was generally tone deaf on the giant picture issue of, are you my friend or my enemy? I'm not even, I think it's debatable which side the guy was on, because he will be sure whenever there's some fashionable opinion out there, and it's not just the transgender issue. It's not just that. It's the masking. It's the whole COVID thing. It's the, late in 2020, he's still talking about a socially distanced Thanksgiving. I mean, come on. Like, that's our standard bearer. Give me a break. Anybody picking that over Angela McArdle, fighting against every bozo in the world, trying to get a seat at the table to at least push things in some kind of rational direction is just a blankety blank hero, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. It's the most interesting the Libertarian Party's ever been to me. We'll see what the results are, but I think it's worth trying and doing it the way they did it. If you're running and you're not going to win, which is every Libertarian presidential candidate, the least you can do is be inspiring. Ron Paul did not become president, but boy, did he inspire a bunch of people, change minds and hearts. Chase Oliver wasn't doing that. And in his defense a little bit, this was an election. In 2016, Gary Johnson could have done something if he had a brain in his head, because you had Hillary Clinton, who nobody liked, Donald Trump, who everybody was scared of. Well, we saw what Donald Trump looked like. In 2024, the third party thing just wasn't a thing in the way it was. Like, Chase didn't have a chance. It just didn't matter. It was definitely about Trump and Biden and later Kamala Harris. But yeah, I agree with you. I didn't vote for him. I voted for Donald Trump. But that was the first time I voted for the mainstream nominee of a major political party since I voted for Bob Dole as a teenager, because Pat Buchanan told me to. He endorsed him, and I was a kid, and I was going to do what my guy said. Like, I voted third party every other time, Libertarian, Constitution Party. But I think what Angela has done or tried to do, we'll see what the results are, was the right thing to do. And her critics who were just pulling their hair out. I mean, going back to Rothbard, Tom, a lot of people just want to be in a social club where they all agree with each other. And what's the good in that? He used to complain about that, is my point of bringing up Rothbard.
Right. I mean, Rothbard is very interested in politics.
Yeah.
And he understood that in the intellectual sphere, you're plumb line. But when you get to politics, you can give the most plumb line speeches in the world you want. But when it comes down to it, like when I don't think it's pointless and stupid to vote. I don't. I've never found that argument convincing. It always sounds juvenile to me. I've never thought that was convincing.
Agreed.
When it comes down to that, I just think, well, which one of these is going to make the lives of my children better, and which is going to make it worse? And you're telling me that you're looking at Trump versus Harris, and you can't make up your mind as to which one is going to make the lives of your children worse? I mean, you have to be crazy. So, of course you can't support Harris. But also you can't, well, you can. I'm not going to tell people what to do, but I can't just stand around and say, well, kids, I was too good for any of this. So unfortunately, we're all in concentration camps now, but
right.
At least your father still has his principles. I want to read you something. You actually retweeted this today. This is from Trump's speech at the inauguration. He said this: "We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but by the wars we end, and perhaps more importantly, by the wars we never get into. My legacy will be as a peacemaker." Now, I know there's a lot of cynicism about that, and understandably so. But I don't even remember the last time a politician spoke that way. Forget about acting. They say one thing, they do another. I understand that. But I don't even remember them saying this, talking like this. I mean, really, when was the last time we heard anything like that?
Bush, in 2000, pre-9/11, saying, well, we shouldn't do nation building, maybe. Like, that's the closest I could think of. But it wasn't as assertive as what the quote you just read from Trump.
Right.
Nobody, certainly not a president, is talked like that. And we can't gloss over the fact that in his first term, he was the first major president in modern political history not to get us involved in a war. That's a big deal. It's not a small thing. That's sad that that's the threshold for being worth a damn at this point. But yeah, you're right, Tom, who is the last major political figure, much less somebody who occupies the White House, who spoke like that about war and peace? They don't. It's always, we got to start with this war or that war because America is great. We're going to show them democracy. It's always that kind of stuff. It's never, we could be great because we don't start wars. We don't get into wars.
So you've worked closely with Rand.
Correct.
So what do you think, what's the significance of Rand Paul? Like we all understand the significance of Ron Paul. What's the significance of Rand Paul?
He's the most high profile, active political member, libertarian political member in the United States today. Now his father is retired, and obviously Rand Paul is a senator. Rand Paul has consistently, whether it was during Trump's term or Obama, tried to raise libertarian issues and ideas, and sometimes it's successful, more often not, but we're used to that as libertarians. But in a big way, and I'm partisan. Look, I work for the guy. I like the guy. I respect the guy. He's one of my heroes. But in a way that I don't think gets enough credit from our side. My favorite example of this, I used to do these debates with Jeffrey Tucker at SFL conferences about voting versus education, right? And I was always the political guy. Yeah, let's get out there and vote. Like, oh, no, just educate. I always would point out that they're not mutually exclusive. Probably, arguably, one of the greatest educational things that a prominent libertarian does in recent political history was 2013 when they were trying to confirm John Brennan to the CIA. And Rand had that filibuster. What was the issue? It was over droning American citizens. And did the government have the right to do that? And I remember Dave Weigel, I can't remember if he was the Washington Post at the time, wrote this article that just pointed out this issue that most Americans weren't thinking about, the droning of American citizens by the Obama administration at the time. Public opinion had swung 50% in the direction of Rand Paul. Then people saying, no, you shouldn't do this. So it went from, we weren't even thinking about this to, that Rand Paul's everywhere, and we agree with him. The federal government shouldn't do that. That was a political thing. It was also an educational thing. It was both. So you're asking what's the role of Rand Paul? Stuff like that. Stuff like right now, this TikTok ban, being out there in front and being like, this is against free speech. You shouldn't be able to do that. And then Trump talks about it, gets them to reverse it. He's part of that. Let me give you another example. Was it 2017 when we heard reports that Donald Trump was going to take retaliatory strikes on Iran? Do you remember that?
I do.
It happened. John Bolton was in the room and it was thing. I mean, we were on the cusp of it, and it didn't happen. He reportedly asked one of his aides, what would the civilian casualties be? Trump thought they would be too high and called it off. But what also happened, and Politico reported this, he had talked to Senator Rand Paul prior. He had also talked to Tucker Carlson. And I think they both told him different versions. Politico reported this too, as much as you can trust them, which is not much. Told him, the president, different versions of, remember when you campaigned, you said that the Iraq war was a mistake and we should never do that again? He was basically, yeah. He's like, well, this would be the beginning of your version of that. Do you want that? So people in Trump's ear do matter, especially if you've got John Bolton in one ear saying, let's bomb everybody right now. And you've got Rand Paul saying, here's why that's a bad idea. Or Tucker Carlson would say that to him too. That's one of his roles. I mean, obviously he has to serve his constituents in Kentucky, but from a libertarian perspective, he's been doing that the whole time he's been in the Senate.
Hey gang, it's January, the very beginning of the new year, and that's a great time to get our priorities in order. People scoff at those of us who set goals at the beginning of the year and determined to reach those goals, but to heck with the scoffers. And in particular, let 2025 be the year that you check getting life insurance off your list. You want your family taken care of in case anything should happen to you. And I myself have tremendous peace of mind because I've arranged for just that. Well, Policy Genius is the place to go. Policy Genius's technology lets you compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. They're the country's leading online insurance marketplace, and you can rely on them for unbiased advice. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. It's super easy to use, and they've generated thousands of fantastic reviews. Secure your families tomorrow so you have peace of mind today. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description or on the show notes page to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. I think in particular his his role during COVID, it was very, very important. And not just with the confrontations with Anthony Fauci, although those were the most obvious, but that he was one of the people who, he took an early stance on this, saying that this is not a good idea. This is not based on reason. This is hysteria-based policy. Can't be a good thing. He and Thomas Massie were the best. There were certainly a few others, but I think they were the best. And again, in a Mitt Romney administration, they're not listening to Rand Paul, and they're not. Mitt Romney wouldn't have changed a thing. He would have followed. He would have had no doubt about it. He would have had vaccine mandates. Absolutely no doubt about that. But Rand and I think Rand in effect gave permission to others. I mean, Rand was maybe not quite a senior senator by then, but he'd been in office for about 10 years, and everybody knew. I mean, you remember I don't know if it was Time magazine or what magazine it was when he was elected. He was on the cover with the headline, something like the most interesting man in America, because he had ideas that didn't fit in a neat little ideological box or a box that we would find on the political shelf in America. He was uncategorizable in that sense, and therefore interesting. And so when he would take a maverick position like this, not a fake maverick position like John McCain, occasionally I'll side with the Democrats on something. And oh my goodness, what a maverick. No, he would stand up against absolutely everybody. Well, that suddenly made it a little bit easier for the next guy to stand up, and then the next guy and the next guy, because he had been the first one. He was sound on Russiagate. He was sound on a lot of things that it didn't win him a lot of favors in the media for being sound on. But at the same time, when Trump is wrong, Rand typically won't be wrong with him. He'll just stick to his own opinion. And on some level, you have to figure even a guy who kind of likes yes men has to sort of respect somebody like that.
I think my understanding of their relationship, just as an observer and just, thinking about these things and observing, they respect each other. And I think Donald Trump understands when Rand supports him, great, all the better. He likes that. But when he opposes him, it's not personal. I think that's key. And that's the difference. And he's not going to try to hurt Rand. When Trump got mad at Massie over the COVID stimulus checks, Trump took that personally. But, they got better later, but that's what it's all about for Trump.
Yeah.
When Rand suffered the slings and arrows during early COVID, do you remember when he got COVID and then wasn't wearing a mask and would say, "Why do you have it? I have natural immunity." The press, "Oh my God, look at this quack out there saying that he doesn't have it anymore." He just let them do that, and you get forward in time, and time passes, everybody finds out he was right. All the things in which the ways he challenged Fauci, all those hearings, who was funding this, National Institute of Health, gain of function research, what did Fauci know about it? What did he sign off on? Are the 6 feet apart things scientific or something you just made up? All of it. When Fauci was sitting in that chair saying, "Doctor, you don't know what you're talking about." Well, Rand Paul did know what he's talking about. As you said, Tom, he wasn't just spouting off to put on a show for C-SPAN. These were real things that nobody was talking about. He was doing the job of the press, who no longer do that. The mainstream legacy establishment media see their job is promoting and protecting establishment narratives. That's what they do. So here's a senator who he and his team are doing the research and go, oh, what's this email here about gain of function? And what's that? What's going on there? They did all this, and then he said it publicly in front of Fauci. The press jumped on Rand Paul for doing their job, what they used to do 50 years ago. So, yeah, all of that stuff matters. He's had a big role to play. And I would add, Tom, going back to our earlier conversation, a libertarian Republican like Rand Paul was uniquely suited for Trump in his first term and is uniquely suited for what he might do in his second term. If that was a President Mitt Romney, like you said, if that was a President Jeb Bush, Rand Paul would not be a factor in any decision-making or policy or anything because they wouldn't listen to him. He would be Ron Paul in the Senate. Like, all right, there's that guy over there by himself again. So he was uniquely situated. How did he become a senator? Because the Tea Party son of Ron Paul ran for the Senate in 2010. If Ron Paul didn't blow up, we ever heard of Rand Paul? Would he be a senator? Those are victories. They are. And they came from our movement, what we were doing way back when.
No doubt. But the thing that does upset me, I mean, we've briefly mentioned Thomas Massie, is that he shouldn't have been treated the way he has been. I mean, the Trump thing, as you say, they buried the hatchet. And he actually, on my show, I asked him, how did it come about that you guys buried the hatchet? And he realized that he had never told the story before. So he told it on my show, which was kind of nice. But it's more the Trump supporters who are anti-Massie, who are really infuriating. And it's not even just this Speaker Johnson thing. That's a separate matter.
Right.
But, Trump didn't like him, so that was enough for them. Like, that, come on now.
It's that dumb.
I mean, Massie is better than Trump on everything.
Right.
Or eventually they come around to Massie's position. They eventually come around to, oh, you know what? Maybe they shouldn't have voted for that spending bill after all. Well, how about that? Would have been nice if, people hadn't jumped all over him. And in terms of, as a person, he's as you know, he's a very, very impressive person. And not just because he has fancy degrees, but because he has the knowledge that actually accompanies those degrees.
He's a smart guy.
Say again?
He's a smart guy. And to your point, that when Donald Trump said Thomas Massie needed to get kicked out of the Republican Party, there are two things I want us to remember about that history. Number one, Liz Cheney immediately sided with Donald Trump and gave money to Thomas Massie's primary challenger at the time. So this is long before J6. Just saying. Anything the neocons can do to go after the libertarian, she was going to use that popularity of Trump to take out a political enemy, this anti-war Republican.
Yeah.
The other thing people should remember, it's exactly what you just said, Tom. Thomas Massie's complaint was he wanted a roll call vote, so people's names were attached to this vote. This is the economic stimulus for COVID, to remedy COVID somehow. He complained that they didn't know where all the dollars were going. Nobody had time to read the legislation, which is per the usual in Washington. 3 weeks later, that's how long it took for the reports to start coming out that all sorts of people that didn't need the money, didn't deserve the money, shouldn't have the money, were getting it. And small businesses and others who needed it were not. That's exactly what Thomas Massie said was going to happen. And that is exactly what happened. And he never got credit for being right because nobody wants to go back and look that stupid. The people who wanted to get kicked out of the party or harmed or discredited or whatnot. But he was right.
Yeah, he was. And he definitely deserved better than he got. It's incredible to me. We should be thankful we have somebody like him. Every time you hear his testimony or his his questioning of witnesses, it's a masterclass in how to do it. And so he was fantastic on January 6th. He was great on Russiagate. All these things that, in fact, were Trump issues that directly involved accusations against Trump, because these were the correct positions to take. Massie took them. And I know on some level we would all like to have somebody who agrees with us all the time. But it's much, much better to have somebody who agrees with us when we're right and who cautions us when we're wrong. And that's what you have in Massie. And Trump supporters ought to recognize that. But it really, really was a matter of with the Johnson thing. Well, Trump has said Johnson is the guy he wants, so now it's time to get on board. And I just thought, what Washington needs is more yes men.
Right. Mike Johnson's bad for all the reasons that, Massie said. But remember, Massie was the one that did well Johnson. He wanted to keep Kevin McCarthy. He said, we might end up with somebody worse. Thomas Massie's right again. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, just you always want to bet on this guy. Tom, I did want to bring up in this conversation, because I think this is of interest to libertarians, classical liberals or whatever, an issue I don't get to hear talk about much within the context of Trump and what's going on now. I think it's safe to assume that you are in favor of free speech in the First Amendment. I know I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a safe assumption.
Pretty basic thing, right? We're in a political environment right now. This was one of the first things before the Gaza stuff, which is a big part why I voted for Trump, and we're seeing some good things with that now. I didn't like what was happening in Palestine with our dollars. But another big part of it, it was woke at one point. That's kind of cannibalized itself at this point, but it was just the basic concept of free speech in America and protecting that. In the Republican Party, you have hypocrites who want to, deport certain types of protesters and stuff. That's not right. That's not free speech. That's not First Amendment. But those are the opinions of some people within the Republican Party. That's not the entire party. Today, when Trump was inaugurated, he said, we're going to stop the state pressuring social media platforms to censor. The Republican Party is unquestionably the only party that's willing to stick up for free speech and the way we've historically understood it. And the Democratic Party right now that just lost, there is a consensus from the top of the party among its progressive wing and to every voter you will talk to, almost every voter. I'll say something like this. This is how the conversation goes, Tom. Hi, I'm Jack Hunter, a right-leaning guy. I believe in free speech. Progressive friend, do you? Of course I do. Everybody believes in free speech. This is Jack Hunter speaking again, but what about misinformation and disinformation, or even hate speech? That person will say to a voter in that party, oh no, we can't allow that. We got to regulate that. We got to do something about that. That kind of, that's the whole party. And like the ACLU 30 years ago would have heard about, like, no. And now they've kind of bought into that too. But Joe Biden, Kamala Harris threatens to sic the Department of Justice on social media platforms that don't censor. She just ran for president. The Biden administration was going to establish a government disinformation governance board that would look into our speech and regulate it. The entire Democratic Party were like, oh man, that's crazy. They were like, we need that. We can't have misinformation. That's scary. There's one party, however imperfectly, and it's Trump's Republican Party, who enough people, including him, say, that's bad, that's anti-First Amendment, that's anti-free speech, and a Democratic Party who are just completely outraged that Mark Zuckerberg would allow free speech on his platform, or completely outraged that Elon Musk would allow free speech on the platform, or completely outraged at Matt Taibbi for reporting on the fact that the federal government pressured these social media companies. They're mad at the reporter, not the fact that the government did that. So I just think we're in a political environment where we could lose free speech real quick if we don't push back. And one half of politics in America, one major political party, is totally fine with that. They see it as a positive good if we don't have free speech and they control the narrative on everything. That's scary, and I don't think enough people recognize it that way. And yeah, we've got to combat that.
Well, and I don't think enough people have seen, maybe you've seen some of the polling data about where Americans stand on this. And as you say, yeah, in theory, they're all for it. But then when you say, all right, well, would you allow somebody to say X and Y? Well, of course not, because that would be dangerous, because they might mislead people into thinking, okay, that's what free speech is, though.
Right.
Now, the other thing is, we live under a regime that does nothing but mislead us 24 hours a day. This bother these people not at all. So the numbers, like particularly when you break it down on a partisan basis, in terms of support for or opposition to free speech, are startling. I don't have them at hand at the moment, but I've written about this in my newsletter, and it's not good. So it is something. It's not something I expected, frankly, Jack, in my lifetime. That I thought that was pretty well established. Nobody was actually going to disagree with that.
But we're losing that. Look, even in Biden's farewell speech, he tried to ape Eisenhower's military-industrial complex phrase. Do you remember what he said? He said, we have to beware the tech-industrial complex, where they don't have fact-checkers and they don't have content moderators. He was talking about we need to beware free speech. That was part of his farewell address. That's how deep this sentiment goes within the Democratic Party. Yeah, I'm with you, Tom. I didn't think in my adult life we'd see a day where most Americans didn't understand that basic constitutional premise, but that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, I think that there has been a bit of a shift now in going into 2025. I mean, the fact that Mark Zuckerberg even felt like he needed to give that little speech about how, it's what a shame it was that what the government did to him, and he really wanted to be a fighter for free speech all along, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. His sincerity doesn't even matter. It's just interesting that he felt like, at this moment, he should say that.
I agree. Ron Paul would always say, everybody in Congress isn't going to vote like me, but we want to incentivize them to vote the right way. It's not about whether it's genuine or sincere. It's what happens. And I think he might be sincere. I don't know. I don't know his heart, but he's saying the right things. I want to encourage somebody who's going in the right direction. I just want to beat them with a hammer. I mean, if they're doing the right thing, for God's sake, that's a good thing. But the idea that that's where he thinks he needs to be, that says a lot. Look, these people I was talking about who don't believe in free speech and seem to love a war if it's in Ukraine and all, there's no reasoning with them. They needed to get their ass kicked in 2025, and that's what happened. They did. I mean, I'm speechless. I'm literally speechless because I can't talk to them about these issues in any rational way. And I've never been that person like, oh, one side's better than the other. I've hated both parties most of my life. In the Bush years, I admired more Democrats than I did Republicans. And, I like Dennis Kucinich a hell of a lot more than I liked any of those Bush neocons. But that's where we are right now. It's just in a different place. It's a different Republican Party and it's a different Democratic Party.
Oh, I can attest to this, by the way, that it's not like, well, Jack is just a longtime Republican partisan. I mean, that would make people who knew him in the old days laugh. I mean, in fact, when I knew you the best was in touch with you the most of what I was writing was about what was wrong with conservatism and the Republican Party and what they needed to shape up with. And it was mainly because there are a lot of reasons, but I realized then when the left got to be like the full-blown left got to be in charge, I realized, okay, I guess I had been letting them off the hook a little too much. Maybe I had been focused a little, but it's because I felt like I was fighting against the neocons for the hearts and minds of the same people. We're both trying to get the same, just ordinary workaday kind of guy, who has common sense about a lot of things and doesn't trust the Democrats. I was trying to reach those people, and the neocons were trying to reach those people. And so that was why I focused so much on them. These were people who were never going to be persuaded by the left ever. Right. So I didn't have to worry about that. So that's why I focused there, and that's where you focused also. So again, it's not like, well, I've been a lifelong Republican, so of course I, vote for X and Y. I'm just observing what's happening in the world, and I'm trying to choose what I think will do the least damage, again, for in terms of long after I'm gone, so that my kids can inherit the least destroyed country possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Back in those days when I was doing talk radio, as the tail end of the Bush era, the beginning of the Obama era, I stopped calling myself a conservative on the air because I would say that they'd be like, "Yeah, Dick Cheney." I'm like, "No, I'm not that. I'm a, whatever. I'm an anti-war. I don't know. Didn't he want to call himself a Republican at the time? But it was most people. You're right, Tom. They identify with their party first. Well, if this is what, and that could be a good thing for what we want. There were people who used to yell at me on the air and say, "You don't want John McCain to win. You're a liberal. You're a liberal because you don't want the Republican to win. And you think Obama's right about the Iraq war." I guarantee you some of those same voters, if they're alive, are saying right now, "America first. Why are you sending all our money overseas?" They're Republicans. And their guy was Bush, and now it's Trump. I bet it's some of those same voters. And we might look at that as hypocritical. I look at that as they're saying the right things right now, and that's good. And I'm like, yeah, dude, Trump's the guy. He is the guy. Listen to him. America first. They're like, yeah.
Yeah, well, Jack, as we wrap up, I'll say that what I keep saying to people on here is that I am very glad about that. But that I feel like these people haven't been tested just yet, and they could be one terrorist attack away from being back to as bad as they used to be. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, on the current bridge, they're looking okay, these people.
You use what you've got in the current moment, appreciate it, try to cultivate it. That's all you can do. It's always going to be changing. We're going to be dead and gone. It'll be something else. But we're here in this moment. That's what we're fighting for.
Well, Jack Hunter, I appreciate your time. Rand Paul Review is what to look out for.
You can find me there at Substack.
So on Substack. I'll link to it in the description of the video. Also, tomwoods.com/2597, where I also have Jack's X account. It's Jack Hunter 74, because I presume that's the year of your birth.
That's right. Just turned 50 this year. Crazy.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can't even talk about that. That's another conversation altogether. But thanks, Jack, very much.
Good talking with you today, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.